Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us again for another episode of our side stream. We kind of had a little bit of a detour just because of last week. I was having some issues with my internet. In fact, I went and upgraded my bandwidth so that hopefully we can have a much more pleasurable stream in terms of FPS and all that other stuff. But we're doing kind of a special stream today that we're going to be talking about, mental health, the stigmas, how we can find support, what are some of the issues that we face out there when it comes to, maybe trying to get that help, how your family might perceive things, your friends, your close loved ones. But before we get started, let's get into the introductions. My name is Matt Bergendahl. I go by the handle Frago. I'm a licensed clinician. And today here at our side streams, we're going to cover, we got the main topic, but we also have our own personal insights when it comes to the topic. And let me go ahead and introduce you, everybody, to Hannah. Go ahead and introduce yourself. How you doing?
Hey, I'm Hannah Siller. I am a public speaker. I do blogging. I do videos. By the way, those of you who've been watching, as I've been talking about over the last few streams, I was going to start putting out my own videos. I actually did it. So I'm
Yay!
also, yeah, I run all of our social media. So if you're talking on social media, you're probably talking to me. But if you want to take a look at what I'm doing, you can actually check out our YouTube. And while you're there, feel free to check out some of the stuff we do for side streams as well. But yeah, so I'm doing my own videos, I'm doing blogs, and some of my, I guess you probably care more about what my background education is, but I have a master's degree in counseling with an emphasis in trauma and crisis. And I am currently working on my doctorate, so a doctorate in psychology. So I kind of come with some very new knowledge as far as what's kind of going on very currently. I have a lot of knowledge. I'd say probably my specialty is mostly with the younger adolescents, children, even up to maybe young adults, a lot of trauma, crisis, those kind of things, grief. That's my area of specialties. Where we've got, I know Matt he's got more clinical experience than I do by far. So he's going to have a lot more base knowledge to add to what I can bring. So hopefully this stream's going to go really well and we're going to be able to answer a lot of questions. This has been a topic we have
Oh, yeah.
gotten so much. Just everybody has been requesting, hey, when are you
Mm-hmm.
going to talk about, stigma? When are you going to talk about how we can support people? So I'm hoping we have some good conversations.
Me too, me too. And just to let everybody know, this is our usual disclaimer. Here at the Side Streams, we are purely psychoeducational. We do not provide any kind of counseling services just by the nature that we can't provide confidentiality. We got the HIPAA, we got all that stuff. But with that being said, we encourage everybody to get in there in the chat room. We love getting that interaction, the feedback, everybody's thoughts and opinions on whatever topic that we're talking about. And just if there's one that's a little bit more personalized, we will read it, but we won't read it out loud because we might try and use our video clips at another time, and we just want to preserve your confidentiality to the best that we can. However, again, this whole point of these streams is to help folks understand a little bit better mental health, some of the obstacles and hurdles, the stigmas of it, but also to get your questions out there. If you have a question, we're going to do what we can to try and answer it. And there is no dumb questions. There is no dumb questions. If it's on your mind, spit it out there, and we will roll with it and answer it to the best of our capabilities. With that being said, let's just go ahead and jump right into it. Is there anything else that we're missing, Hannah?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that the reason that we're going to be sorry, I'm getting my chat set up because I totally forgot that I need to actually be able to see chat while I'm doing this. I've been playing with my video screens and
Ah,
how I have everything set up, and I went, oh gosh, that's right, we're going to have chat. So I was setting that up really quick. But I want to make sure that one thing, disclaimer I want to do is that we are starting to make sure that all of our videos, we are sectioning them out into
mm,
chapters, because a lot of people, when you jump in and you're only able to watch maybe the first half or the second half, it's really hard to find out where you kind of missed what we were talking about. And so we have already kind of talked ahead of time to say, hey, we're going to be talking about these subjects. So if you ask a question that has to do with something we'll be talking about later in the show, we're going to be putting a pin in that. And it's not because we don't love your question and we want to ignore you. It's just because we want to make sure that we are answering that question within a section that we are going to be talking about that particular subject, so that when I go back and we're making it into chapters, we have all the information in the best spot we can have it in. So that was just something that we're kind of doing a little different from now on. It was not something we had originally planned
Mm-hmm.
on doing. And now that we're starting to split into chapters, that's something that we might have to do if you're like, oh, that's a great question. And we will be totally answering that in
Mm-hmm.
about a half an hour. Um,
Yep.
just be prepared that that's something we're going to be doing. But yes, please answer or ask questions, give information, and we will do the best we can to get to all of it.
Yeah. Well, that being said, Hannah, you want to kick it off? I think what we're going to do today is we're going to, just like we do on our normal chats, is just kind of open the subject matter, open the subject matter, and then just kind of talk about and roll with it. I know you're very passionate about this. I mean, I think just about anybody who's in our career field are should be at least pretty passionate about the stigmas of mental health. What do you bring to the table in terms of your insight, in both professionally or personally, or however you see it?
So one of the things that I have is I actually going into this, I have a blog that I wrote recently, and it was about mental health and why awareness, representation, and education matter. And I'm going to try not to get super soapboxy with this,
Mm-hmm.
but the reason I actually originally wrote that was because of a lot of frustration of what I was seeing with people who were asking for information about mental health. And then, as you know, people like Matt and I and other creators are producing this education, no one's actually taking it and using it and viewing it and getting the information out there. And it's not about wanting us to get our information out there. We do this because we care about everybody getting this information and this
Mm-hmm.
education. And so when we take the time to put out the education, you know, if we really want people to actually get it and use it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of wrote this blog in frustration one night over finding out that a lot of my friends and family had not been actually checking out my educational resources, even though they had been the ones requesting it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's my little like kind of soapbox on that. So what I bring to the table is I've done a lot of research because of that blog into kind of what the issues are. And so I think that the first thing I think we really need to address is kind of the biggest issue, which is stigma. I
Yes.
mean, stigma in mental health is so rampant. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anybody here has ever, I don't know, watched a movie or any TV show or pretty much anything that has to do with social media. You probably have seen the way that mental health and mental health professionals are represented.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know Matt and I, we've talked about this a lot about, we're joking about, when you go into, everybody has this idea that we're going to have, the blazer on and, the big chunky jewelry and, the pipe.
Elbow
That's kind of the,
patches.
that's the idea that people have, is that it's just going to be stuffy. And
Mm-hmm.
here's the thing is that we are mental health professionals. So us right here, with his awesome shirt, by the way. So we've
Yeah.
got a little bit of F cancer.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a little Star Wars. This is mental health professionals. We are normal people,
Mm-hmm.
and what we see on TV, for instance, one of the terms that they like to use is the term shrink.
Yeah.
And Matt, how do you feel about the word shrink before I give my opinion on
You
it?
know what? I think just because of my personal life experiences, it doesn't bother me that much. I mean, I've heard, I know the reason behind it and all that other stuff, but I heard it so much in the military. I heard it so much, even with my own family. It's like, okay, whatever. I'm fine with that, just so long as they're not going to, and I believe me, folks, I say this because it's happened. I've had people saying, "Are you reading my mind?" Like, no, we don't quite work that way. We don't read minds. It would be a little bit, well, it would be a lot more fun if we could, but it's not like that. So personally, it doesn't bother me. I guess because I've been called worse.
It, that's a good point. Now it's funny you say that because I actually was super close. I have a shirt that actually makes fun of psychology,
Hmm.
and it says "Psychology major, keep talking. I'm diagnosing you." And we all know that when
That's a
you're
good one.
early in your psych degree, it's a tendency for the undergrads to
Hmm.
suddenly think they know everything, and they're diagnosing their friends. But I love how you said that. It's true. I've actually been in a business meeting where I was meeting with a financial advisor of all people,
Hmm.
and I always kind of keep my mouth shut about what I do and what my degree is and what my experience is, and let my husband kind of take the lead on that stuff. And because he has a normal career that nobody gets weird about. And so all of a sudden, when it kind of comes out what I do, almost every time I've met with somebody, including this financial advisor, the first response was, "Wait, have you been analyzing me this whole time?" And I mean, I mess with people, so I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely. I'm about maybe 5 minutes away from having a complete diagnosis." No, that's not. No, I don't just walk into rooms and just start looking at people and being like, "Yes, exactly what's wrong with you." No,
Hmm.
it's because it's about the relationship. When you're
Hmm.
doing any sort of mental health profession, the reason we can do what we do is because we actually get to know our clients,
Hmm.
and they talk to us, and it's just like you hear these things of who not to lie to. You never lie to your lawyer, you never lie to your doctor, and the third one is you should never lie to your mental health professional, your counselor, your
Well said.
therapist, because when we are talking to you, that's how we're getting to know you, is we
Hmm.
need to get to know the real you, and we don't judge.
Right.
That's literally our entire purpose, is to not judge.
And we take
And
you at face
yeah,
value. We will always take you at face value. If you say to me, Matt, I am feeling really good today, but reality, you had a terrible week. You just don't want to talk about it. We're going to take you at face value. It is not my job to prove or disprove that you're telling me the truth.
absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, so that was kind of just the kickoff of this subject. As far as just getting into some of the different social media, some of the different things we see in TV,
Hmm.
movies, books, even just kind of getting some information. If anybody has anything that they would like to add to that, as far as, "Oh, I saw this show in this particular situation," came up. If not, Matt and I will continue to just give our own examples of some ways that mental health is perceived
Hmm.
and represented. Because I think that representation is probably one of the most important
Hmm.
areas for us to really talk about, is how we're represented.
Absolutely, and I've got plenty of material too. But by all means, chat, jump in there if you got some thoughts and stuff. One thing that I always like to start off with, because this is not the first time I've approached this subject, is that a lot of folks, when they have the associations of psychology, if you were to ask them, can you name me two predominant people who are associated with psychology? And of course, the very first one is always who? Freud. Everybody knows Freud. And now Freud does have his place in psychology. They called him the father of psychology. He developed the psychoanalytical approach when it comes to helping people out. And so when a lot of people think about that, they still have these ideas. And I'm really talking about those who have never stepped foot in a counseling session. They still have the idea that, they're going to be sitting on this long couch. The counselor or the psychologist is not even really looking at them, so they can get that, transference going on, and just really analyzing every little thing. Well, I always talk about it. I said, hey, folks, you do realize that style of psychology formed like around, what was it, 1890 or something like that. I mean, I said, psychology does have the benefit of evolving ever since it started. and so it always kind of makes me laugh when I see those videos or the cartoons where you got the guy on the stretched out couch. And I still see it today, and it's 2019, and there
Absolutely.
are hundreds and hundreds of different therapeutic approaches that you can take. Like the one that I use is solution focused brief therapy, but I'm also eclectic. But there's just many different types of therapy, and there's many wonderful people who have contributed to psychology. Let's
Absolutely. I utilize cognitive behavioral therapy, which is, I'm not going to say the furthest thing away from psychoanalytical theory, but it's pretty far removed because it takes more of the direct approach. And actually, what's interesting is most, I think, actually brief and solution focused, they're all part of the whole cognitive behavioral talk therapy, humanistic. There's a whole umbrella there that this actually has taken and shaped into. And so most of the time when you're talking to a therapist, they're actually using stuff that has very little to do with Freud. And I am personally I have no love for Freud. I'm not gonna lie, I have absolutely no love for Freud. But one of the things that is, and I love that Nightmare just actually said this. I'm going to read this out, and we'll get to the other question or the other comment in a second. But yes, no blaming mommy here. So those who aren't familiar with Freud, Freud has a lot of different things with psychosexual stages and different things. He also has a whole thing about penis envy. Don't get me started on that one. If you want to start talking about sexism, I don't consider myself to be like a new wave feminist or anything like that. Um, but I'm definitely all about, gender equality,
hmm
and even the whole penis envy thing actually gets under my skin. So Freud has been very much disproved throughout the years, and one of the things is it all came back to things like an Oedipus complex.
Yes.
It was, a lot of the things with the psychosexual stages. If you are an uptight person, by the way, some little education out there. If you've ever heard the term of anal retentive for somebody who is super uptight, that actually is derived from a Freudian idea that there was a situation that happened during maybe when you were potty training, and uh, yeah, no vagina envy though. Yeah, no, actually, womb envy did come up later. Nightmare, FYI, there was actually some theories that came up with. Well, fine, Freud. If women have penis envy, you have womb envy. So, because
Yeah.
it's something women have and can do that men can't.
hmm
And so, yeah, so there's a lot of these terms that are even still used today as far as our ideas of how we describe personality, and these things have all been very largely disproven or kind of abandoned,
hmm
or at least, if not disproven or abandoned, but changed and kind of made a little bit more relevant. And so, yeah, a lot of the stuff we're seeing in TV and movies are all based on that idea of Freud, of,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
telling me about your childhood. That
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is literally a Freudian satire.
Yeah. hmm
That whole thing, or your mother didn't hold you enough.
hmm
That's Freudian. That they're making fun of Freud when they do that, and it's just so outdated that maybe that would have been funny, in the 1900s. Now it's people don't get the joke anymore, so they start to think that it's actually true.
And people still use the phrase like the Freudian slip. You know, I hear that all the time, the Freudian slip. But and health, I'm going to definitely answer your question in a second. For those of you who don't know, the Freudian slip is like when you're consciously trying to say one word, but you unconsciously comes the word rises and you say something else. I'm doing a really terrible job. Maybe somebody can give a better example. But you did a Freudian slip. That's what you must really truly mean when you're saying that. I'm like, no, your brain does get things scrambled up every once in a while. Um,
Uh,
Go
so
ahead.
an example in a movie is the nice to mole you, because the person
Yes.
has a mole on their face, and so you can't say the correct word because you're so fixated on the mole. That would be a Freudian slip.
There you go. Thank you for
Um,
saving me on
it's
that
just
one.
it's random. This question is interesting. So we have a question. Do you think his work was messed up because of his drug use? The thing is that back then, I mean, everybody was I mean, drug use was not the same thing. It's just like back in the Western days, people were frequently taking opioid. Opioid was just something that you took. It was, in bottle form. It was what you took for a headache. So it was just the medication of the time. So I don't necessarily think that his work was directly like, oh, he was so off because of his drug use. Because, we're going to bash on Freud a little bit because of the perception it has today, but at the same time, we do have to, as mental health professionals, we do have to kind of give a little bit of a tip of a hat to the fact that a lot of his work, especially with things like within the area of Freudian slips, which comes from his work with the unconscious, our unconscious thoughts and our id and our ego and super ego, and kind of the things that we have dormant that we're not really realizing our drives, all of that kind of started to build way to different evolutionary theories, to different biological theories, to different behavioral theories, to different cognitive theories. It was really the jump off to a lot of the different stuff. So even though a lot of his stuff, we can say he was sexist because he was,
Hmm.
but at the same time, that was the society. At the
Yeah.
society, that's what it was. And so it's frustrating coming into a society like now and people still using Freud as an example when that's so outdated. But back when Freud was doing this, this was revolutionary. And a lot of the stuff he was doing was just, it was the time he lived in.
Hmm.
You know, you can't be upset when you watch I've actually never watched the show, but I've heard stuff about it. Mad Men, in Mad Men, I guess there's a lot of very sexual um sexist things that happen, but that
Hmm.
was the time. That's what it was.
Hmm.
You can't say, well, the show is sexist. No, it's depicting a time when those acts of a boss, hitting on the secretary and making sure she dresses pretty enough for to please him, those were things that were acceptable. Freud just was a that was his era. That's when he grew up. That's what he knew. And his drug use, I think, I don't want to say how much of it contributed. I think
Oh,
that
go ahead.
he,
I'm gonna jump in when you're
yeah,
done.
go, because
I
I'm trying to
okay.
be nice.
I'm not gonna be nice. I think the guy was tripping balls half the time he was coming up
Oh,
with
he
this
was,
stuff.
he was.
Yeah, and like I mean, it's he is basically was trying to, you know, make sense of human reactions and humans actions that they take, and trying, and some of it really made sense, like depends on your upbringing and stuff like that, absolutely. But I really do think the guy definitely used drugs as a way to expand his mind in a sense that he can wrap it around these issues and then make something presentable. Because if I remember when Freud first came out, they thought he was just crazy. They thought he was a nut job, but he started doing more and more work and research into his theory, and he gained the traction that way. But he was also analyzing dreams. He thought that
Yeah,
that was a great place to really understand where that person was coming from. And other theorists uses dream analytics as well. But at the same time, one of his quotes was, "Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar," and so it's really interesting to see. But Hal Stevens, honestly, my opinion, I think the man was brilliant in his time
mm,
with the help of the drug use, but obviously now it's become very, very outdated and just really not useful anymore. Okay, well, I'll put my last two bits on this way. Psychoanalytic therapy is still being practiced today,
mm,
but in most cases, it'll take years of work before that person is able to turn things around and maybe get into a better spot. And the practice that I use, the basis of my practice as solution focus, you can start seeing things turning around within a few sessions. So let's put it to you that way. They both work, but one is just going to be a little bit quicker than the other. Hannah, you
and
got
that's where
anything
it
else?
comes down. Yeah, that's where it comes down to.
Mm-hmm.
We have to remember that one form of therapy is not going to be useful for every single person.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen things like EMDR work for a somebody who has dealt with PTSD, and I've seen it have absolutely no effect.
Hmm.
I've seen CBT, which is what I use with cognitive behavioral therapy, work for someone with PTSD. Other people has no effect, but EMDR did. So all of these different things out there, it's because we're not one size fit all society. We all need some different things. With the psychoanalytical theory, a lot of what they deal with is unconscious thoughts. So these are people that really have dealt with, they have blocked it out. They do
Hmm.
not remember, they don't have any idea how they're dealing with it. They don't know things that they've dealt with in their past. It might utilize different areas of specialties such as hypnosis. So I can't really completely, even though I'm going to give this little example. So in my undergrad, when I was first learning about all these perspectives, the way I actually remembered
Hmm.
was Freud was psychoanalytic theory. That's actually how I remembered that Freud was part
Uh-huh.
of the psychoanalytical theory, is because Freud was psycho. And so I have very little love for Freud, but at the same time, I cannot deny that he has
Right.
had a huge
Oh
impact.
yeah.
But I just that's a big thing though, is that the stuff that you guys are seeing in television and movies, that outdated laying on the couch, the outdated idea of what do you feel about your parents, this outdated everybody is gay because of something that happened when they were, breastfeeding as a baby. Literally, these are some of his theories. I can't make this up. Those ideas are presented in TVs and movies to this day. And again, maybe back in the 1900s in a little comic clip, it would have been funny because people were, oh, yeah, Freud, that was so funny. Now people are going, oh, is that really what it's like?
Hmm.
It's not. I did work in a clinical setting, and it's nothing like that. My sessions, I mean, I did dress casual. I would dress like this in sessions because I worked with teens, and I that's just how I am. I could not get away with wearing the blazers and stuff like that. It just drove me crazy. So, yes, I'm a little bit more casual, and I'm sure, Matt, you probably are a little bit more like me,
Hmm.
a little bit more casual in settings. But my clients would come in, I'd just be, hey, what's up? How's your day going? Is there anything you want to talk about? Um, what's going on in life? And we would get into it and we'd start talking, but it was a conversation. It's more
Yes.
about a conversation, and then every once in a while me stopping and interjecting and saying, okay, so I really want to understand this a little better. Why did you think that when you hit that person, you got into a fight again at school yesterday, and what was going through your head during that time? And then maybe challenging and saying, well, what are some things we could have done better in
Hmm.
hindsight? What are some things we could do better? And that's more of how the therapy session would go, rather than me sitting down with a pen and paper. And I'm actually going to give you guys, just for anybody who is in therapy or ever been through therapy, it's really unnerving because we always have our notebook out and we're taking notes, and people get all nervous about that. Um, but here's a little secret: 95% of the time, when, for instance, I would be taking notes, I'm jotting things down like your pet rabbit's name, because I want to make sure to remember that. And so I'm remembering mostly identifiable things about our conversation. Oh, they have a pet rabbit. Oh, their
Yeah.
best friend's
Hmm.
name is this. Oh, this and that. We're not sitting there going, this person seems like they are having delusions. And I'm not writing that. I'm writing little just notes about you so that I can get to know you better, not so that I can sit here and judge who you are.
Right. And I make it a point in my sessions with a brand new client. I would tell them, I says, hey, I do take notes, but this is nothing. If you want to see my notes at the end of the session, that is
Absolutely.
that is fine. I said, but what I do though, I tell them, I says, I want to make sure I am as accurate as I can when it comes to capturing what we did in session and putting that in the progress note. And if you feel uncomfortable about that, just let me know. But I've never I from what I can recollect, I never had an issue where a client were like, dude, don't be writing that, or asking, what are you writing? It hasn't been an issue, but it's worth.
It was an issue quite a bit working with youth.
Oh, could be a
it was
youth
it
thing.
was a frequent thing of, did you just say something about me? What did you just say?
Yeah.
And I actually had to let him know, like, no, actually, legally, you have every right to see what I'm writing. There's, because when you're in as a therapist, everything is not about our opinion, and that's just something I think a lot of people don't understand when they're looking at, with the stigma of mental health in mental health professionals, because that's, if you haven't gathered, we're kind of talking about the stigma of mental health professionals in general.
Mm-hmm.
We get a lot of that idea of that, we're judging you, we're analyzing you. We're not. And so when my clients would kind of freak out and say, well, what are you writing? It's because they thought I was putting down some opinion. We actually can't. Like, when we're writing up our progress notes, we can't put opinion. We can only put observations. We can only put clinical things that we've noticed. Agitation. That person, you were agitated during that session.
Mm-hmm.
That's something we observed. You were. There's no
Mm-hmm.
denying it. Or a quote of what you said. You said, I'm feeling suicidal today. Okay, we're going to probably put that down as a quote that you
Yeah.
actually said, because that's important.
Pretty important.
But
Yeah.
we're not going to be sitting there going, that shirt and those shorts, they just told her not doing anything for her body. She looks totally ugly today. Yep. So, we're not doing that. Or, wow, this person is insane. We're not writing any of that.
No. No.
We're just, what's your bunny's name? An important quote that you maybe said. If it's a really long story about, a cousin and an aunt and then a grandparent and how they interact, we might be jotting that down with a little kind of diagram so we can keep it straight, because we might see 4 or 5 people in a day, not
Mm-hmm.
just you. And we might see 20 to 40 people in a week. And we have to keep these things straight and make sure that we
Yep.
understand who you are, because we want to get to know you
Yep.
individually.
Absolutely. And so we're kind of moved from talking about Freud and all that stuff, and again, he gets his props for what he's done. But what I like to look at, I'm gonna is talking more about my experiences. I'm gonna, as far as psychology goes. So everybody in the profession recognizes that mental health is a very more of a Western medicine, but there is a similarities in the East, and when it comes to what we do, it's in the talk therapy and stuff like that. But one observation that I had ever since I started going back to school was like I'm Hispanic. I'm half Mexican, half German, and my family, we had the cultural norms when it came to going to counseling. It was very frowned upon.
Yeah.
One because most of the people who they assumed who would be helping us are they're white Americans, and they just wouldn't understand the culture. But also the idea that it's very Hispanics are very, for the most part, very family orientated. So if you have an issue, either with yourself or something else, rather than going to a counselor, you go to a family member. And that was this, and there was a huge stigma of going out there to get that help. I remember that's what happened in our family when I had to explain to them why I was going to school and getting a master's degree and then getting a license. They just thought that I kind of got the cold pricklies when I was trying to do that, because not because they were being mean. They're a very supportive family, but they didn't understand the stigmas of how it presents itself in the cultural aspects. Hannah,
Yeah.
what are your experiences with that in your area?
That is something that I worked in with at-risk youth in a area of Southern California that is predominantly refugee and minority based. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm walking in, a white girl, and it was really funny. I actually had a client who, after nearly a year of seeing this particular client, they looked at me and said, "Well, I mean, I don't remember what the context was, but they actually said, "Well, you're Mexican, right?" And I was like, "No, not at all." And this client was absolutely shocked. Like, "But you work here."
Oh.
Okay, yeah, but just because I work here doesn't mean that I, have to be
Mm-hmm.
Mexican. That's how it is. There was a lot of assumptions that were made, because I actually worked to get to know, being from Southern California, being in San Diego. If you're not from here, we have a very diverse region. We like to joke, and anybody who's watching, I hope I don't offend you, but like Mira Mesa, you're going to have a lot more of an Asian culture. Where I'm at, we have actually, specifically in my areas, is more Indian culture, not Native American Indian.
Mm-hmm.
We have a just Escondido, where I kind of grew up, it was more of a Hispanic culture. And growing up, I actually used to be made fun of a lot because I was typically one of the only white girls in the class.
Oh.
And it was interesting because when I think it was in maybe first grade, everybody, we were supposed to draw our breakfast. That
Mm-hmm.
was, one of the projects we were doing for the day in first grade, because that's what we do in first grade. And I actually was sitting there drawing huevos rancheros because that's what we had for breakfast. That was a normal thing. And I know I'm not saying it right. I am a white girl as far as my pronunciation. I know that. But those are the types of foods I grew up with. I grew up with our next door neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
The day after Christmas, we'd go over and go tamales, and
Ah, yes.
she'd have a bag of tamales waiting for us because that's how I was raised. And so then when I went to a school that was um, a little bit more Caucasian,
Mm-hmm.
I got made fun of a lot whenever I was around the Hispanic kids because they're like, Psh, you don't know us, you don't know our culture, and I'm like, actually, I kind of do. I was raised in that, so my perspective in this area is very biased because
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in just an area that is so diverse. We would sit, yes, I went to church. I was a little good church girl growing up, and going down the line, we had every single race represented of my friend groups. I don't think I had maybe but one or two friends who were
Mm-hmm.
Caucasian like me.
Mm-hmm.
All of my friends were of different races. And so, yeah, it's just one of those things that I think I've been blessed in that area because moving forward, I've been able to use that when I'm in a counseling setting.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one of the things we do in counseling when you're going to school is a lot of cultural competency
Oh,
for
yes.
issues like Matt's talking about, is making sure that we understand what the difference between a collective culture and an individualistic culture. And for instance, collective culture is going to be more of our Asian populations, more of our
Mm-hmm.
Hispanic populations. They're going to have more of that family where it's the betterment of the group, not the betterment of the individual. It's more collective
Mm-hmm.
based. Western cultures are going to have more of an individualistic idea where it's more about the individual succeeding, more about the individual issues, and very much more kind of once you are your own person. And an example of that is working in a high school who was predominantly, we were I think 89% Hispanic, in the high school I worked at. And it is where we would have students that we were having attendance issues with because, well, they had to stay home and watch a sibling. And because even that person's individual goal of going to school, this family came first. And some people will look at that and say, oh my gosh, but you're keeping your child out of school to watch a sibling. And yeah, that's not necessarily like the greatest thing in the world, but at the same time, understanding that that is so amazing to have a family system that cares about each other so much
Mm-hmm.
that they're willing to say, hey, it's not about me, it's about what the family needs. There's something really beautiful in that.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so
Absolutely.
in counseling, when we're going through training, a lot of our training and our schooling, at least in my experience, with being more recently going through school and being in California, has been very much focused on respecting even things and challenging ourselves of what do we see in a culture that we maybe have a bias against, of oh my gosh, I do not think that's the best way to do things, but then saying, well, no, maybe this is actually something that's a really good positive that we can work with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, again, I'm biased, SoCal girl. I literally know very few people who are Caucasian, so I mean,
And just throwing this out there, folks who are watching, give us your thoughts on this. Today's topic, we're talking about mental health, the stigmas of it, the stigmas of getting support. A lot of people have these ideas as far as what it's like, and for those of you who have never experienced counseling before, what are some of the thoughts that come through your mind? Do you worry that you're going to get judged? Are you worried that the counselor is going to go and just completely rip you a new one or something like that? I'm very curious to know what your thoughts are.
I don't think I ever ripped his client a new one.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. There's been times where I've been like frustrated, but usually what I would do is I'd say, hey, the situation we're talking about right now is making me a little frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
We don't tend to just lose it. We're literally trained how to stay calm and non-judgmental, because it's not about us. It's not about
Right.
what we think. It's about why you are, even if you're doing a behavior that is risky or detrimental or damaging to your life, it doesn't matter what we think about it. It matters why you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything we'll be doing in session is going to be, well, okay, yeah, you did that. What do you
Yeah.
feel about it? Do you not want to do that anymore?
Mm-hmm.
Or, do you want to change things, or do you like the way you are? Because that's going to, like, very much depend on where we go. And one thing that I used to tell my little sisters is, and my sisters actually come to me about things. I have two very younger sisters, one who is just turned 26 and one who just turned 17 2 days ago.
Mm.
So I have very, very younger sisters, and they actually come to me about stuff. And I'm obviously not going to, on live on Twitch, say what they've come to me about, because that's not cool. But they've come to me about very difficult situations,
Mm-hmm.
and I am very non-judgmental. And one of the things we like to joke about is that I'll be like, oh, you say you feel like a purple stuffed unicorn. Um, why do you feel like a purple stuffed unicorn? Like, I have
Mm-hmm.
no emotion as far as being judgmental, even if that's what you say you're feeling like. And so I think that a lot of counselors are very similar to that. We don't judge. We really
Right.
genuinely don't. And that's something that a lot of people can't kind of wrap their heads around,
Mm-hmm.
but it is actually true. We genuinely do not judge our clients.
And I think since we're talking about the counselors right now, I think it's really cool to bring up is just some of the misconceptions of counselors themselves. Um, we've talked about in the past, there's good counselors, there's bad counselors, there's counselors who are in between. Um,
Obviously, we're talking about the good ones. I'm sorry if you've ever been judged or has ever had a counselor go off on you.
right, right.
Those are not the good ones. We apologize for that. The majority of us are like this. Continue, Matt.
Exactly. And I think that's really interesting. I never forget when I was going through a master's program. This wasn't even in our ethics class, but one of our professors was talking about how should a professional conduct themselves in the general public. I'm like, well, what do you mean? And he went on this really long rant saying how, as professionals, we must hold ourselves to a higher standard. Insofar that you should avoid social places like a bar. You should avoid going to places like what else other than a bar, wherever
Concert.
a concert where it's getting crazy and people are doing whatever during the concert, like a Woodstock situation. And he just said that we really shouldn't put ourselves in those areas because we're trying to give that idea of being professional. And I really had an issue with that because it made it seem like we can't, as counselors, be human. We can't have needs, we can't have desires, we can't make mistakes. And it really kind of created to me this really false idea of how we have to be, and being able to disclose, or how much we disclose, and all that other crap. And I it was just one of those areas that I'm like, no, I'm not gonna really accept this in my own practice because I don't agree with it. I think I can still be professional, but still show to my clients that I'm very much a human. I do stupid stuff all the time. Hell, I even swear every once in a while. That's just the way it goes. And I think that is important that, and this is my own perception, I think it's important that as counselors or in the mental health professions should be able to present themselves as being down to earth humans. We have we're just like everybody else. Don't put us in a separate, don't put anyone like that in a pedestal because we're bound to disappoint you.
Absolutely.
And to me, that is one huge stigma when it comes to the mental health professionals. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I've actually run into people. People always think I've actually used to do this. Maybe the purple hair is going to change this response. But one of the things when I was working at a high school is I would go in And I would say the very first thing I would ask when I was getting to know the different students I was going to be working with is I'd ask them what kind of music they thought I listened to. And pretty unanimously, for some reason, they all said country. There's a kitty. They all say, sorry, I had to keep the door open. So if there's kitties in the background, I apologize. Unless you love kitties, and then welcome, kitty. Uh, so I would ask them, and they would always say country, and country is probably like one of the last things I listen to.
Hmm.
And so it was really interesting for me when I would actually say, okay, well, this is what I listen to. Is I actually listen to more like rock, new and old punk. Punk is actually probably one of my favorites. Punk and grunge. I grew
Yeah.
up in the '90s era of listening. I actually was kind of obsessed with. I still listen actually to Sum 41, Offspring, and Blink 182. That's kind of what I listen to for like my old school. And then even now, I'm still into Disturbed, Avenged Sevenfold. These are some bands. Hailstorm is actually my favorite band. I got to see them live a few times, including in small venues. I like even the old '80s rock where you've got Bon Jovi and Aerosmith and stuff like that. That's kind of where I fall. And people, and yes, I'm not gonna lie, I also totally love Backstreet Boys.
Oh
I do.
no.
I like
You
everything. I
know,
really do.
it's one thing to like butt rock, but you like. Oh, okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
I do. I do. It's the time I grew up is yes, my playlist goes it literally my playlist goes from like Britney Spears to like Phantom of the Opera and then to like Avenged Sevenfold. It's really weird, but the majority of what I listen to on a day-to-day basis is going to be more in that rock punk grunge sort of area. And that used to just absolutely shock my former students
Hmm.
because I didn't look like that's what I would listen to. And so I've gone to concerts. I went to a festival that was Uproar Fest, which was amazing. It had Hailstorm, Avenged Sevenfold, Disturbed, Stone Sour, some really great bands. And I've run into students or clients in situations like that. And just a little side note is that FYI, if you are seeing a therapist, don't be afraid of running into them outside. This is a perception that a lot of people have,
Oh yes, yes, yes.
is that we're going to walk up and be like, "Hi, I'm their therapist and they have depression." That's not what we're going to do. This is where we don't do that. In
No.
fact, one of the rules we kind of have that we would that especially where I worked is that if we see you, we don't even acknowledge that we know you unless you walk up to us.
Hmm.
And then we will just go with whatever story you say. Oh, I go to Pilates with this person. Yep, totally go to Pilates. Our instructor, Susan, yes,
Hmm.
Susan, our instructor at Pilates. I've done stuff like that because a client wanted to say hi to me, but didn't want to say how they knew me.
Right.
So we're not just going to run up to you and be like, hi, we're their therapist.
Yeah, we're not
So,
doing it to be rude either. If we
no, we're
if
not.
we don't say something to you, it's not because we're trying to be jerks. We want to preserve your right to confidentiality. Now, again, if you come up to us, that's a different story. But we're not being rude about it. I've done that. I've ran into several clients out there on the street, and I'm like, oh, do they see me? And I just keep just walking around, and wait until they see me. Sometimes they approach me, sometimes they don't, and if they don't
Yeah,
approach me, I am okay with that. You're not hurting my feelings.
don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you just can't think of an excuse or you think it's awkward, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, sometimes it's a little awkward for us too. Um, we don't know what to say, we don't know what to do. We want to make sure we're human. And so that's, going back to that is, I've seen people at concerts and we're human and you're watching these TV shows, you're watching these movies, and a lot of times, the first time they'll go into session, it's someone they're super stuffy and they just sit there and go, how does that make you feel? How does that make you feel? How does that make you feel? We don't do that. Now, I will admit, I've actually said those words and I always cringe a little bit when I have to say, well, okay, how does that make you feel?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I go, oh, part of me just died inside because I had to
Mm-hmm.
say that. But we're not going to sit there and be super stuffy. We're not perfect. I have bad days.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, last week when we canceled the stream because I'm not gonna lie, Matt was having his internet issues, but I was just also just really not feeling it. Not that I didn't want to talk to everybody, but I was just feeling like blah, and I was so tired, and
Mm-hmm.
I was having just an off day, and we all have that. And even
Yes.
as counselors, we're human. And so if you are a person and you want to seek counseling and you are looking for a therapist, there's on my blog, which we've already linked once. I don't it will all be up. I'll make sure all these links are up on our website, as well as our Facebook, our Twitter. You'll find it anywhere. If you're following us on any social media, it will be there probably by the end of today, if not tomorrow. But I have two blogs. One of my blogs is about starting counseling, and it kind of takes a lot of these things as far as what your perceptions about therapy are, and then what the truth is, as well as I also have the other blog that I talked about a little earlier today, which was about why representation, education, and awareness all matter.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of both cover some of the stuff that you see. But when you're going into therapy, one thing people think is, well, all therapists are the same. And so if I go into one and it doesn't work for me, then therapy doesn't
Mm-hmm.
work for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, that therapist didn't work for you. But there are tons of therapists out there that use different tools. We actually Matt and I met in a group that was based around geek therapy. So using geek culture in therapeutic ways, such as Dungeons and Dragons, video games. Matt is part of Stack Up, who uses a lot of video games and different gaming aspects in order to reach the population, for aid in mental health, especially within the veteran community. And so that's what we do. There's somebody out there for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So just because you go to one therapist and you don't gel with them, you don't click with them, it's not necessarily therapy that doesn't work for you. It's that therapist that doesn't work for you. And that's nothing wrong with you. That's nothing wrong with the therapist. We're all different for a reason.
Yep.
I am not likely going to be the cup of tea of somebody who really wants somebody who is very more put together and a little bit more, conservative. Me and my, purple hair and Star Wars t-shirt and laid back manner. I'm not going to be the right person
Mm-hmm.
for a whole group of people are not going to prefer me, but there's going to be a group of people that are going to love what I do.
Right. Right. And it's just the same thing for me as well. And this wraps into the whole stigmas of counselors. When I started to see when I was working for the vet centers through the VA, my main clientele were active duty and veterans, combat veterans, war veterans, and quite a few of them, they were surprised because, just by the way I dressed, I had my Vans on, I had some khaki pants, maybe a flannel or some kind of a button-up shirt, but people, and I bring this up because again, this is how you gel with your counselor. They're like, you really seem down to earth. I have Star Trek stuff all in my office. Video game apparel, and it really just depends on what you're looking for in a counselor. If you think someone who is a little bit more conservative is more in sync with your thought system, your belief systems, then by all means, that's the person you should be looking for. And if you see a counselor who's wearing a T-shirt like this, you're like, what the hell? You probably are not going to mix with me very well because it's all about that rapport. And again, it all comes back to it. The success of that person is going to depend on the rapport that you have with your counselor. And if it's just not there, it's just not there. And and you have every right to what I call counselor shop. I've seen clients who have lined up 2 or 3 different counselors at one time, not because they wanted to get help for the same thing, but they just wanted to make sure, well, maybe this one will be a fit, this one will be a fit, and then just kind of narrow down, to just one counselor once they've visited all of them. It just really depends on what you want. And I've seen so many folks saying, in sometimes in the Discord channel, and I see it out there on social media, my counselor is just, I feel really bad if I were to leave them and go with somebody else. I said, I said, this is for you. And
Yeah.
most counselors are not going to take it personally if you just say, hey, it's just not working out very well. In fact, many of those counselors will probably say, let me give you some referrals to people who you might mix with a little bit better,
Mhm. Absolutely. Um, So building on that, or actually just kind of changing gears, just looking at the time and making sure we're continuing
Yeah.
to get rolling or stay rolling because we are rolling, is just some of the. I just want to just go maybe point by some myths that people have about counselors, about therapy in general, some things that we hear from society. One of the things that, we've kind of already have talked about it is making sure that, therapy and the counselors, we're not going to be uptight, we're not going to judge you, we're not going to out you. One of the myths is making sure that I've had people, including my husband for the record, and he said I'm allowed to talk about this, is my husband, he didn't get therapy for a very long time
Mm-hmm.
when he really needed it. He was having some hard times with just, work and family and all that kind of stuff, as we all do.
Mm-hmm.
And he wouldn't go because he was afraid that at his work, he was going to be judged. And I was like, well, therapists can't, we're not going to tell your boss that you're in therapy. That's not what we do.
Mm-hmm.
So this is confidentiality. We're not going to just go to your boss and say, hey, by the way, just so you know, you have an employee that is seeking mental health therapy for this. Even if it was a situation where they're like, well, I have to take a session in the middle of the day. What do I put on it? You have physical therapy. Call my office up. I have had clients be like,
Mm-hmm.
yep, they're in physical therapy right now. Totally physical therapy. That's what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Physical therapy. Because they needed that alibi because they didn't I can't tell them, hey, you're in therapy. That's not what we do. So confidentiality. So don't be afraid. And this is something that we see, and Matt's going to be able to talk about the veteran side of this a lot more than I am. But we see this in a lot of work environments. Is I see this a lot on social media of, well, I don't want to see a therapist because I don't think my job is going to be okay with that. And yeah, I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to rose colored glass at it, is that yes, there are some jobs where unfortunately if you have some issues, if you are suicidal and you're constantly being around firearms, this is something that yes, as a therapist we might be concerned about, and we might need to start to figure out how to come up with a better solution to make sure to keep you safe if we are concerned about safety. But if as long as we're not really concerned about safety in general, we don't really care. Okay, your wife cheated on you, and so we're seeing therapists about that. Yeah, we're not gonna go and call up
Yeah.
your boss and be like, hey, just say no. This is they're having a really hard time dealing with this life change of their wife cheating.
It's not always
Uh,
a duty to warn.
Exactly, it's not. And so I know that again, Matt, you're going to know more about the veteran community. But so that's the thing is that you don't have to be afraid of who's going to find out you're in therapy. The only people that are going to find out who are in therapy are you if you tell somebody.
Yep.
And if your therapist is telling somebody and they're breaking confidentiality, that is a legal and ethical concern. So that is something that you can then go to another therapist and say, hey, how do I deal with this? I know that my therapist is doing something. If you ever have a question, seek the advice of another therapist
Mm-hmm.
and say, hey, or look it up online. Is my therapist allowed to do this? Am I allowed to have a relationship with my therapist? Absolutely not, you aren't. So if your therapist is going, well, we can totally date, and you're not thinking that that's probably legit,
Mm-hmm.
seek the counsel of another therapist, go online, look it up. If your therapist is saying things and yelling at you, that's probably not an ethical thing for them to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
If they are telling your boss or telling other people that you're in therapy or what your business is, that's probably not an ethical or legal thing for them to do. So if you have any questions about that, please, 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 if you ever are concerned that your therapist is not acting in a professional way, talk to another therapist, look
Yep.
it up online, seek advice, get another therapist if you feel like you don't gel because of those situations.
Mm-hmm. And kind of going through the veteran community, and I'll make this quick because we've talked about it quite a bit in previous streams. The veteran community is very standoffish for several reasons, and it's not without good reasons. Now, I'm not going to lie about it. In the active duty, they still have a lot of work to do, but it's still a very slippery, dangerous slope when it comes to getting mental health support while you're active duty within the Department of Defense. And what I mean by that, if you are in the Army and you're a troop, and you need help because you're having issues from your last deployment, and you go to mental health on base, chances are, your command line might really know what's going on. They might know what's happening, but the issue in there is that as you kind of touched on, if your career in the military involves carrying firearms, explosives, things that can really cause a lot of damage to yourself or to others. You know, that does become a concern. When I was in the military, I was in security forces, and so I was carrying, light machine guns. I was carrying grenade launchers. I was carrying all this kind of stuff that can wreak tremendous havoc on anybody, and so that's that stigma and that issue is that going to get that help, you might lose your job. So veterans who are coming out of the military with that stigma still there, they're worried that if they go to the VA or if they go to a vet center, that we are going to literally tell everybody your mental health situation. And that's why in our very first sessions, I always go over clients' rights and responsibilities because it clearly outlined that we are not here to talk to anybody about your mental health situation unless you want us to. Unless you sign a waiver and saying, go ahead and release this information to this person, we are keeping our mouth shut. With the exception, of course, of a duty to warn scenario, and that it gets extended to the active duty people who come or used to go to the vet centers because they're just really worried about that stigma that if this gets put on record, I can never purchase a firearm, for example. A lot of people in the veteran community are worried that if they get a diagnosis of PTSD, they will no longer be able to be in control of their own finances, that they have to get someone else to take care of their bills for them. And I said, no, that's only in an extreme case where you cannot literally take care of your own self. Obviously, that's not the scenario in most cases. And so they always have these little stigmas and these little things that are influenced by their time from when they were in the military till today.
I do want to add the disclaimer though, is because this is the same in any situation, is that because we do go through that whole idea of limits of confidentiality. Limits of confidentiality have to do if you are in danger to yourself or others, or somebody is a threat to you. And so those are our limits. Those are the times where if we know that any of those situations are happening, those are the times that we do have to contact authority, and it really doesn't matter what your consent is in that situation. However, the disclaimer on that is that if you are being hurt by somebody, if you are in danger of hurting somebody else or hurting yourself, it is, as much as that is scary to say, hey, well, we're going to break your confidentiality, at the same time, the reason we're doing it is we're saving a life. We're
Mm-hmm.
literally saving your life from either somebody else, from yourself. And as scary as that is to be like, hey, yes, I am suicidal. Yes, I am a danger to somebody else. If you feel you are out of control of that situation, seeking help allows us to be able to fix it. All it is a fix. We're now fixing that situation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so we are taking that situation, we're saying you're in danger, and we're now taking you from being in danger to not being in danger anymore. And so, yes, in a military type of situation, I just had to do a case study for school that was dealing with a situation of a military personnel who was having suicidal risks, who was having PTSD issues. And, what are some of the issues that might come up about the job that they are doing, whether or not they can still go into active duty if they're having these issues. And yes, at times, maybe that is not the best thing for you to do. We might advise you, hey, this is not maybe the best career for you to be in. And that can be scary, but at the same time, we're doing it for your mental health. We're doing it
Mm-hmm.
for your physical and mental well-being. We're doing it for your safety. So that's something that, as much as it's scary to do, I really just, anybody who's out there, just that big disclaimer of, but if you are in that position, you are afraid of telling your therapist that you feel like you're going to hurt yourself or somebody else is hurting you, or you're afraid of hurting somebody else, but you don't feel like that's something, we all have that desire inside that we're like, well, let's try to fix that.
Mm-hmm.
If that's you, talk about it. Let that
Yes.
person know in your life. Obviously not in chat right now, but let your therapist know, let the authority figure know who is able to help you through that. Yes, it might alter your life, but in the end, I do promise you that it will alter your life for the better,
Mm-hmm.
because you will no longer be in that situation anymore. So those are just some of the big myths we have we also have some myths that people had brought up online, and I just want to go through them really
Yeah,
quick.
absolutely.
Things like if you have a mental disorder, you are crazy. We hate that word crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You're not crazy. A mental health issue is literally no different than a physical health issue.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to have the flu, let's say, and I am getting to the point of being dehydrated because of said flu, what do? I go to the doctor. And a doctor, what does the doctor do? The doctor gives me medication. And, I go about my life and I recover from the flu and I'm all good. Or if I have a back injury, I just recently had a back issue that I was going physical therapy for. I was having to go twice a week to physical therapy. And I'm not kidding. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I had to do this. But I went, I did it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now all of a sudden, I just went and played Dungeons and Dragons in an adventure league the other day,
Mm-hmm.
and I was able to sit in a hard chair for 4 hours with no back pain because
Nice.
I learned what I needed to do in order to alleviate some of the back issues I was having. That's what therapy is. Therapy is just physical therapy. It's
Mm-hmm.
just physical therapy for your brain. If you have to be under medication, it's no different than if you are diabetic and you need to take insulin. These are things that we have, and we need to start taking that stigma of that mental health is so scary and it's so different and it's so isolated over here, and realize that mental health and physical health, they're just kind of two sides of the same coin. There's really no difference as far as what you do. And then side note is also, people also think that, well, I got mental health help, do I need to still get mental health help in the future? I don't know. Have you ever had a cold before? Guess what? It's pretty likely you'll have a cold again.
Yeah, no kidding.
That's normal. We have relapses even in our mental health. And I think what we need to start to do as far as breaking down some of these stigmas is realizing where the commonalities are.
Mm-hmm.
Again, learning coping skills, learning communication skills, no different than physical therapy to handle a prior injury.
Yep.
Going to the doctor when you are in a really bad position, like, oh my gosh, I broke an arm, I have the flu and I'm dehydrated, and going and getting kind of that triage help, no different than what Matt does. Matt does that solution focus. He's like, hey, we need to fix this, we need to fix it now, and we're going to do it fast. That's what those types of situations are. Maybe what I'm doing is going to be more like that physical therapy side. And then, just remember, you may break a bone again in the future. You may have the flu again. You may
Mm-hmm.
have a cold. Just because you had it once and you went to the doctor then doesn't mean you're never going to have it again. And then, but the great part is that a lot of the stuff, let's say you do have a cold. Matt, I don't know about you. Do you go to the doctor every time you have a cold?
Yes. I'm
You,
just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I'm like, whoa, oh God. No, you learned how to deal with it, right? You learned, okay, I need to
Yeah.
take fluids, I need to have soup. I mean, obviously, when you're going through cancer treatment, yes, of course, you went to the doctor every time you had a cold. But when you're normally a normal, healthy person who's not going through cancer treatment,
Mm-hmm.
we have a cold and we learn how to deal with it. I have bad days, and I have learned from being in therapy how to deal with those bad days. I
Mm-hmm.
know how to breathe. I know how to do yoga. I know how to self talk and say, okay, I need to do some self affirmations. I'm good. I'm okay. I'm not in a dangerous situation. I am safe. I've learned those things from going to therapy. So, mental health, physical health, absolutely 100% the same thing. They're this, a different side to the same coin.
Well, and I want to touch on something really quick about that. The stigmas of mental health and getting help. The Western world, the Western medicine still really has an issue with doing that. And it just kind of popped up in my mind right now. I think it was, I think it was 2 years ago. Um, 2 years ago, this German pilot, he had flown a plane with passengers, and he flew that plane into a mountain, and unfortunately, everybody died. Now, when they started doing some investigational work, on this person's background, they found out that he was having some mental health issues that he was trying to work with, but he also was worried about going to get the help and what it would do to his career. And because in Germany they have a much more, well, it's a little bit more, much more conservative output when it comes to getting mental health. And because of that, he felt that he had nobody to turn to without damaging his career or ruining his reputation. So he just tried to deal with it his own way. And so we see now, this is a very extreme example, but we can see the impact that stigmas can have on the mental health of people, of a society in general. And so I wanted to bring up that example.
Absolutely. And that's, I think, one of those things is that, we don't understand is that when you're dealing with mental health, it is something that as a society we all are dealing with. We're all dealing with this situation at the same
Mm-hmm.
time.
And I like what Nightmare said. Physical health and mental health are like muscles. You know, they're all,
Absolutely.
every fiber is what we need that in our body to to work to be able to do what it is in our day to day activities in our lives. They're so intricate.
Absolutely. I think that in my world, a lot of the stuff that I've had to learn has been a growth. And I think that, there's been multiple times I've had to go back to therapy because something
Mm-hmm.
else will come up. And just because I maybe learned some good skills to deal with maybe PTSD in the beginning, okay,
Mm-hmm.
well, now I'm dealing with more anxiety. So
Mm-hmm.
now I'm dealing with some anxiety in some different areas. And so I need to kind of go back and do this. Oh, well, now I'm dealing with some grief issues. My best friend passed away, and even though as a mental health professional I should know how to deal with grief, guess what? We're not perfect. When we're going through grief just like a normal person does. We're going to have a hard time. And so, I had to go to a therapist to learn how to deal with grief.
Mm-hmm.
Later on down the line, I'm like, wow, I've had some really big life changes. I think I really need to go to a therapist again to deal with some of these life changes. We go for different things in different parts of our life at different times based on what we're going through.
Right.
And somebody who is, I mean, I've seen people that's just like, well, I just got married and, dating was one thing, but now I'm dealing with in-laws. Okay, yeah, that's different.
Yeah.
They're like, well, I lived with my now spouse for a while. Like, why didn't these issues come up then? Because you're in a different phase of your life. You're now
Mm-hmm.
dealing with the post marriage. Now they're pushing you to have kids. You might be dealing with some of these different other issues. So we all, just based on where we're at in our lives, we're going to go through different things. And I like that comment, the physical health and mental health are like muscles, because we don't, it's just like you don't train for the same marathon the same way. Somebody, one of my husband's coworkers was like, "Hey, do you want to be in my Tough Mudder group?" And my husband's like, "No, not even close."
Yeah.
He's like, "Yeah, but do you want to run the marathon with me this Christmas?" And his coworker's like, "No." That's because they're different fitnesses, they're different areas that you're having to work on, and so you're getting training in that area, that particular area right now. So your life is always going to throw different things at you.
Mm-hmm.
Life is not, it's not the same life all the time. So you're going to experience different things. Things are going to have to happen. And then I wanted to make sure, though, before I forget, because this is on the top of my head right now, is something that I had talked to you about a few weeks ago, Matt,
Mm-hmm.
was about how in the world of stigma, we have what we see on TV, we have what we see in the media, we have the things that society tells us we should believe as far as culture, as far as social media, as far as stigmas, and oh well, what's going to happen at work. But I want to also make sure we talk about kind of our own issues that we have and our own stigmas we put on ourselves, because if I were to ask pretty much everybody who's not a jerk, anybody in the world who's not a jerk,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna put that. And yes, I'm sorry if you judge people for their mental health, you're a jerk, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even gonna I'm not sugarcoating this. If I were to ask anybody, not a jerk, if they would judge somebody with a mental health issue, they'd all say no.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be like, no, I mean, you're struggling right now. Go see somebody. If I'm like, hey, this person just lost their mother
Mm-hmm.
to some sort of sickness, do you judge them for seeking counseling over that? And they're like, no, absolutely not. I have absolutely zero issue with that person. I mean, for gosh sakes, their mother just died. Of course, go see a therapist.
Yeah.
But for some reason, let's say then your mother dies, which I hope that's not the case for anybody going on right now. But let's say your mother dies. for some reason, then we get in our head, oh, but it was okay for them to get counseling, but it's not okay for me to get counseling.
Oh, yes.
And so our self stigma, like our self talk and what we tell ourselves about mental health, I think is something that is really important for us to talk about. Is just, how do we break the stigma? So we've talked about what the stigma is. Now I think we need to start talking about support and how to break the stigma.
Hmm. Well, and it's a very, very tough tough question because there's so many ways to look at it. And let's bring it back into the sphere of what I'm seeing in social media. I see a lot of content creators out there who are struggling with their mental health, and they disclose that, which is very important because some won't even do that, and they'll talk about the struggle that they're having, and I've seen people suggest, well, hey, why don't you try out some counseling, or why don't you try, talking this to someone that you feel, confident with, and they don't do it, and they just keep struggling. But that same person will turn around and say, hey, go get the help, go talk to a counselor, go to a therapist,
Hmm.
and it's kind of like, they say, do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work if we're going to try and to break these barriers and these thoughts of counseling and getting that help. If and I've said it for quite some time now in our streams, ever since I've had kicked the crap out of cancer. And by the way, people who are watching, I just got my bone marrow
Oh yeah.
results, and I'm in the clear. So it's been almost a year now since I had my stem cell transplant. But going back to what I was saying, it was traumatic. Thank you. It was traumatic for me. Okay, and I'm not gonna lie, and I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, and that's why I'm going to see my own counselor. We're using EMDR, and that's what works for me. And
Mhm.
I'm getting where I need to be in my head, and so it really says, and I want to be able to say that I can't say to a person to go get help when I won't do it for myself. I
Yeah.
feel like I'm two faced, and I don't, and I can't work that way. I have to conduct myself, and to me, it's more of an ethical choice rather than just saying, you help yourself, I'll be fine. I'll just keep struggling and hoping to change things using my own tools and devices. And guess what? It don't really work that way. At least it doesn't work that way very well for myself. So that's why, I went and got the help that I need.
Absolutely. And I think that that's why, I go back to the three words that I see is so important: representation, which is what we've talked about with how we're representing ourselves. What are we saying and what are we doing? How are we talking about mental health? How are we presenting things in the media? And I really think that, like, for instance, the media needs to kind of get on the ball here and start maybe. There's tons of very famous and very well known people in the mental health community who can give advice as far as what it really looks like in a therapy room. And I think I've seen, a few times where it's been a very positive representation of mental health, but unfortunately the vast majority is not. And so there's that representation. How are we representing mental health? And that's something that when we went into this, Matt and I had really decided from the get-go that we were not going to sugarcoat our own lives, that when we were having a bad day, we're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
We're going to say, hey, yeah, I struggle with depression. I've struggled with anxiety. I've had PTSD. Because as much as they're like, oh, well, no, you need to be perfect. No, that is representation. We need to represent that, hey, because people say, well, you're showing the bad part of yourself and people aren't going to want to listen to you. But here's the interesting part about that is, yes, I'm showing that negative side of myself, but I'm also showing then the representation of how you can be better.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not just all about the negative, about, hey, yeah, I've dealt with depression, I've dealt with anxiety. It's, I've dealt with depression, I've dealt with anxiety. And these are the things I've gone through to deal with that and to make myself better. These are the things, and this is what I've done. And now I can say full heartedly, 100%, that I have a better life now than I did before
Yeah.
because I've dealt with those things.
Good job being a human, right?
Oh yeah, I know. Good job being a human, just being you.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is awareness, and I think talking about it. And something that frustrates me so much, and if you're on our social media, you've seen one of the memes I created of that when we don't talk about it, when we say, oh, that's just really uncomfortable for me, that just makes me just so sad, and I just don't want to hear about you talking about it. That is the stigma. That is stigma. Stigma is saying that what you're going through is just so bad that I can't even fathom listening to it because it just will make me depressed. Well, now what you're doing is you're saying that that person's life is so horrible,
Mm-hmm.
you cannot even be told about it with just spiraling into a depression yourself. And that is the stigma right there. That is the problem. We need to talk about it and we need to accept it and we need to not make it taboo because a lot of these things are not scary. And one statistic is that just shocks me every time I read about this is that whenever you are diagnosing somebody who has schizophrenia,
Mm-hmm.
you are automatically supposed to do a risk assessment for suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And that is because there's so much negativity built up around schizophrenia
Yeah.
that
Yep.
people, when they are diagnosed with it, they think that's it, my life's over.
Yep.
Now, but that's not the case because we have medication and you take a medication and you learn some coping skills, and most people can live with schizophrenia and not have any issue at all.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
it's just it's they. I don't want to say we cure it because you will be on medication for most likely the rest, if not the majority of your life, and you will have to go to therapy for a continual amount of time, and then maybe go back just to make sure your meds are okay and everything's going well for you. But it's not this huge scary thing. But the fact that we even have to, as mental health professionals, that we have to say, oh, I'm diagnosing you with schizophrenia, now we have to do a suicide assessment
Mm-hmm.
because of the stigma associated around with it. That just seems very wrong to me, that's it's so negative. And so we have to talk about it, we have to raise awareness. It's not scary. Matt and I, we've talked about our own experiences with PTSD and some of the experiences we've gone through. I've had people in my own life be like, oh, you went through that, and they're like sitting there crying over the things I went through. Well, how does that make me feel,
Mm-hmm.
as a person, to just that my experiences have brought somebody else to tears.
Hey, Hannah.
Yeah.
How did that make you feel?
We're gonna it made me, we're gonna use our I feel words now.
Mm-hmm.
I feel angry. No, but no, that's this, but right, like it just
Mm-hmm.
it gets you when you're just like, oh yeah, thanks. My life, I guess, is just that bad.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is that mental health isn't. It's really not, and we need to start taking away some of that stigma of how we are representing it and how we are building up awareness of it. We need it to be positive representation, saying, "Hey, I've been through mental health issues and I'm still awesome," or building up the awareness of saying, "Hey, yeah, I can talk about these things and it's not as scary as you might think."
Mm-hmm. Well,
Sorry, I'm reading the chat
no,
too.
no, that's fine. And it was just, I like my family is very supportive. They've known about my struggles with my experiences from the war for quite some time now. So it certainly is a little bit easier for me. But I see where you're coming from, and I see it happen all the time where people are, you know, it, I can just can't imagine how someone who's trying to open up and be vulnerable and talk to somebody who they think they trust about what's going on in their life, just to have someone shut them down like that. It's got to be um, a huge, huge negative impact on their mental health. You know.
Yeah, and I mean, I have a blog as well that I just did that I had a really hard time doing, and it wasn't until we started deciding we were going to do this topic that I decided to get brave enough and do it. And it's about infertility. And so if
Mm-hmm.
anybody wants to check that out, it's also on my website. We linked it earlier. Again, you'll be able to find it on all of our social media. As far as, I will be linking all of these blogs, I will be linking them in the descriptions of the video once it all goes up on YouTube, so you'll be able to find all this stuff. But I did a blog about infertility, and the reason I did it is because one of the things that it's very similar to mental health, and the fact that when we are talking about when you're a woman and you say, "Well, I can't have kids," people get really uncomfortable about that,
Mm-hmm.
and they go, "Oh, well," and I've actually had people in the past look at me and go, "Well, the way that you're just blunt with that, that was really awkward." Well, you were
Oh,
literally asking
oh,
about
really?
my you're literally asking about my reproductive habits. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how awkward is it that you just flat out felt it's just okay to come up to me and say, why don't you have kids? Aren't you going to have kids? What's your plans to have kids?
Mm-hmm.
And then when I answer honestly of I can't because I need to not continue to be questioned about this, it is now awkward for you. I see it as the same thing in mental health, is that when somebody asks a question and we are honest about how, oh yeah, well, I've had PTSD, or oh no, I take medication for depression, they go,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you just made that really awkward by being so honest. But why? You asked.
Right.
Um, why is that an awkward thing? We shouldn't have that be an awkward thing. There should be zero things wrong. I took medication when I was going through treatment for my PTSD because the anxiety it was putting me through
Mm-hmm.
was just so extreme. I was having a really hard time in my life. I don't want to say functioning, I was functioning just fine, but I was having a really hard time processing everything I was going through because my anxiety was getting so triggered as we were in therapy talking about some of these very, very traumatic situations of abuse and
Mm-hmm.
violence, and it was hard. And so yeah, I was on medication. There absolutely is on medication. Now, I see nothing wrong with the fact that I was on medication.
Yeah.
I see nothing wrong with the fact that I've had flashbacks, that I have had in my younger years. I had suicidal thoughts while I
Mm-hmm.
was going through an abusive home situation. And people go, oh, well, that makes me so uncomfortable to know that about you. I don't think it should. And so I think that, bringing up awareness and again, that positive representation,
Right.
and I think that that's something, and then adding the third element on, which is education and things like this. And just having that education happening about what these things are so that we can say, see, it's not so scary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not as bad as you think it is, and I think I really hope. I mean, there's a ton more material that we can talk about, but we've got about 30 minutes left. Um, and this is an ongoing discussion, and I think that what we should do is I do this all the time. I see people posting stuff in social media. I'll get out there and try to smash the stigma. And anybody who's watching today, I really hope you do the same thing too. Just take charge, the call to arms, or however you want to call it, and get out there and try to show that we can be vulnerable and we can talk about this. More importantly, we can get help for it. If
Absolutely.
you see somebody on there on Twitter, on Facebook, or whatever, who are showing that they're struggling, support them if you can, and at the very least, listen to them. You know, um, I try to do it all the time. Of course, at the same time, I'm in that kind of the catch-22. If I got a family member who's talking about how depressed they are, obviously I can't ethically give them a counseling session because that's a dual relationship and that's a big no-no. So I'm very different. However, the rest of the people, other folks who are not in the same position, they can sit there and give them that help that they need and support them. And at the very least say, hey, I see you're struggling. I see that you're putting your hand out to try and get some help. Let's get it on the website and take a look at some close resources that might be able to help you out with your situation. That's simple. If they're not asking you to do a counseling session with them, they just want you out there to maybe talk about what's going on.
Absolutely. So I think that's a good segue. And just to the last thing I wanted to make sure to cover is one of the questions we were getting a lot is how to support somebody who
Yes.
is going through mental health issues. And I'm just going to also add that little caveat of how to support yourself. And I think that this comes back to education. If you have somebody who is going through a situation in your life, educate yourself as far as resources that are available to get that person help.
Mm-hmm.
Non-judgment, it's all that awareness, representation, education. Awareness, making sure that we're talking about it. Representation, making sure that we're not being negative about it. Education, making sure you're educating yourself. And I'm not saying that if your friend is suicidal, you need to educate yourself on how to counsel them through suicidal thoughts. That's not your job. But being aware of a different situation as far as maybe how to reach out to a hotline.
Mm-hmm.
If you know that your friend is suicidal, maybe sending them some resources and saying, hey, I know you're going through a really hard time right now. Let's make sure to say, you know, save this in your phone. Let's save this in your phone right now so that if you are having a hard time and I'm not available to talk to you, you have that resource available that you can call the suicide hotline. Call it with them. That's
Mm-hmm.
something I used to do with clients all the time is when I was having a client that was suicidal is I would call the hotline right there with them when they were not having an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Because that way they learned, oh hey, there's someone on the other end that actually cares.
Mm-hmm.
It takes away some of that fear. If you are going through something with a friend that's maybe experiencing grief, maybe educate yourself on what's not good to say. I have 3 blogs dedicated to grief because everything that we say about grief is wrong. And we are going to, Matt doesn't know this, I'm requesting that one of our next few upcoming sessions is I do want to do maybe 1 or 2 videos on grief.
Okay.
So heads up. And it's because everything we say about grief is wrong. Saying better place, that's wrong. That's not, anybody who's ever been through grief, real true grief, knows that those cliches are the last thing in the world you want to hear. Educate yourself. Find how to support. You can literally go on Google and say how to support somebody through grief.
Mm-hmm.
If you are on our social media, you can go to my blog and find ways to support someone through grief. The education is there. So if you want to learn how to support somebody who is going through mental health issues, educate yourself on it. And when you have, especially when you have resources like this that you know about, pass it on. We're not in this to be monetized or to get a billion followers. Not gonna lie, it would be super cool, but that's not the reason we're doing this. We're in this field to provide education. We do
Yep.
these videos so you can pass it on to your friend who is saying, hey, I'm struggling with stigma and support of mental health. And you can say, hey, I have this really great video on stigma and support for mental health. And so it's really important to just make sure you're educating yourself if
Mm-hmm.
you want to support somebody and not being judgmental.
It goes a long way. It really does go a long way. I'm reading the question right here. Um, yeah, oh, here we go. War Wizard. By all means, share us that link. Go to our Facebook page and put it on a post. I would love to see it because the more information that we get, the better off everyone can be because we can incorporate that in our work. We're always trying to get feedback from folks as far as what they would like to see in these streams because, again, how can we break the stigma of mental health if we don't have the feedback of what you've perceived to be the stigma? We all have our own ideas of it, and so we're always kind of basing it off of our own personal experiences. But there's a whole community out there who might have a different thought process when it comes to mental health, and that's exactly why we're out here doing what we're doing.
Absolutely.
Like Hannah said, we don't make a dime off of any of this stuff. We don't do it for that reason. And there was this huge pushback that was going on Twitter. I think it was just last week about people who take or assume the role of being a therapist without any kind of educations, credentialing, or anything like that, only to push their self-help book. Folks, I do not have, believe me, one, I will never ever be providing counseling services online, and 2, I don't have a book. Don't worry about it. I'm not writing a book or anything like that. And even if I was, which is perfectly fine, people like
I am.
right, Hannah,
but I know what we do here.
Hannah and myself are very ethical in our workings and the way we interact with people. So it's not like we would say, "Hey, why don't you borrow my book?" and you'll know. What? It just doesn't work that way. Oh.
Yeah, I'm providing the information for free. Yeah, I do plan on writing a book, and I do have a blog and all that kind of stuff. And yes, I do have a Patreon, but that Patreon is mostly for advertising. It's so that we can get our information out because sometimes people don't share stuff. People, I'm always telling like my friends and family that, likes are fantastic, but shares go so much further.
Yep.
And so I am one of those people that on all of our social media, if you put up something that you're like, hey, can you share this? Tag us in it. Say, hey, I've got a friend who writes mental health blogs. Send me her link. I will post it. I will share it because I want to make sure what we do, especially with the use of our social media, it's not just about us. It's about spreading all of this information. And just as a little soapbox thing is that remember that when you are dealing with people who are using a business account on Twitter, on Facebook, there is still a person behind that. I have had a lot of issues this week. of people not wanting to be nice to me when I am on Psi Streams Twitter versus when I'm on my personal Hannah Siller Twitter. So just remembering that we are actually people behind the keyboard, that we are here to support each other and that we are here to spread the word. I'm not in this for myself, I'm in this for all of you. So yeah, that's what I do. If you want to say, hey, I know somebody who does this really amazing mental health stuff, just share it with me and I'll get the word out, because that's what we want to make sure. Can it be, is that for me? I wasn't paying attention.
No, it wasn't for you.
Okay, because I just see something coming up and I'm like, wait, is that for me? Sorry, that's for those who do not have um our chat on the side. When if you're watching this maybe on YouTube later, it was just something that looked like it might have been for me, and it was not for me. So chat can sometimes be a little bit of a two-edged sword. It's great to be able to get information from the community, but at the same time it can be very distracting when we're talking as well. So yes, so pretty much what we're doing is we are out to educate. And so if you have something you want to know about, ask. If you have a friend or a family member that is going through something, educate yourself about what it is. That is the best way to support those in your world who are struggling with mental health issues. Educate yourself about how to get help.
Hmm.
If you know that your child might be going through some issues, look up maybe some therapists who specialize in maybe more child psychology types of things. Give them a call. I can't think of any time I've ever had a call from somebody who just had a question. Hey, what do I do? Is this something I should bring my kid in for? Is this something that warrants actual therapy? And I'll have a free, it's free. I will have a free half an hour conversation with a parent just asking if that's something that would benefit their child.
Hmm.
And so, but the thing is then this is where I get a little frustrated, is that you have to do something. You can't just say you want it. You have to actually do it. It's not easy. You have to put in the work.
Hmm.
I get very frustrated with my friends and family who say, "Oh, I'm having this issue with grief in the family. I don't know how to support this family member or this friend who's going through grief." And I say, "Well, I have 3 blogs," and then I find out months later they never read any of them. And I'm like, "Well, I literally wrote that to help you out."
Hmm.
So you have to actually go through the work. So yes, it is important. If we're talking about how to support, if we're talking about how to break the stigma, it starts with you. It starts with our audience.
Hmm.
Us who are working in the mental health field, me and Matt, we are already doing it. This is what we're doing. Sorry, I think it's the other way. He's over here. I'm backwards in my camera. Um, so we are doing the work. We are mental health professionals. And so we know how to do it. We know how to support our friends and family. We know how to advocate. We know how to provide resources, because that's literally our job.
Hmm.
Those out there who are saying, well, how do I do that? How do I do what you do? How do I support people? You put in the work to learn how to.
Yeah.
You watch these videos, you
Take some
read the
effort.
blogs. Yeah, it takes effort, and that's my challenge and my slight soapbox of that. If you're complaining that you don't know how to help somebody out, and yet we've shown you videos and blogs,
Well, it's kind of like we
how
live
much you really want to help.
we live in a day and age where if you don't know how to do it, chances are if you type that question into Google, you'll find a couple of good useful resources, and I kind of don't always. Unless that person is like 80 years old and lives under a rock and doesn't even have internet, when someone tells me, I don't know how to do this, I said, well, did you ever try looking on Google? And like, huh? I'm like,
Yeah, Gramps, ask Google.
ask Google. There you go. So there really is no excuse to put forth a little bit of effort, doing a little bit of research. I'm not saying you need to start pulling up scientific journals on how all this stuff works, but what I am saying is just a little bit of effort might go a long way, and it might have huge dividends and payouts to your relationships, both with your friends, close ones, loved ones, and all that stuff. So before
And with this question, or with this comment, I just want to say that, just to comment on it, is that, and if you feel, I'm not saying everybody out there has to be a therapist. You don't all have to learn how to be a
no.
therapist. But even if you're not the person that is maybe good at, let's say, having patience with somebody, if you are, maybe you have past situation with, let's say, substance use. I'm just going to use this as a random example. If you have your own biases and issues because you have maybe dealt with substance use, and from like a family member, let's say you're I'm just going to use me. Let's say my mom is an alcoholic, which my mom was an alcoholic. I may not be the best person to maybe talk to somebody else who is struggling with substance abuse. Now, as a
Hmm.
therapist, I've been trained how to, so that's different. I'm saying, taken as a personal side, I may not be the best person. However, that doesn't mean I can't do the research and say, hey, I know somebody who would really be good at talking to you, or I've done some research of, this is just a meme, this is a book, this is a, it's helped other people, so maybe it will help you too. If you don't feel you can be that person, to literally be the person that sits in the room and goes, yes, I understand. I'm here to support you and I'm here to love you and I'm totally able to listen without any judgment or bias. Unless you can do that, uh, there are resources out there that have the resources available. And we talked about this in our suicide awareness video. We were talking about streamers and people who are on social media who are having people to come to them and say, hey, I'm having clients, or I'm having people who are my audience are bringing up, oh, I'm suicidal right now and I don't know how to help them. So I say, oh, I'm not a therapist. Don't come to me with your problems. Instead of taking it that way, why don't you just post a link and say, this is a really good
Hmm.
site for how to seek help. This is a place that you can go to talk to them. Even if it's just like a automatic hotkey that just posts it. So you don't even have to deal with it. You don't have to say anything. You just hotkey it. It comes up with a little information of the suicide awareness line. It maybe comes up with that there's people here to support you, whatever it is. You don't have to be the person actually assisting that person with their mental health issue. But if you cannot be that, at least be non judgmental and at least educate yourself enough to know how where to send them.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's an easy step. Just a little
Yeah.
bit of research on your part. We've been talking about blogs, we've been talking about links, talking about our Facebook page. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste all the URLs here in chat. So if you want to discover more, it is all there right now. And I urge every single one of you, if you haven't done so yet, check out the links, hit the likes, hit the subs, and just start building up your toolbox of knowledge when it comes to helping out your family, your loved ones, your friends, and so you can start helping doing your part. And it kind of reminds me of Nightmare's streams, because whenever somebody were to follow his Twitch streams, it says, you know, are you? I'm doing my part. So now you guys need to do your part, and start working at it. So we all need your help. It can't just be
Yeah.
two of us who are trying to change the stigmas of mental health. We need help, and that's why we are always pushing this information out there. And Hannah's working diligently with all the social medias that we've got. Getting the information out there the best way that we can.
Yeah, and whatever you have, whether you have Facebook, you have Twitter, I tend to put everything on both. And if there's ever somebody, again, you want me to support, I will add them to feature videos on our YouTube. I will post their stuff on Twitter. I will share their content on Facebook. We will give them a shout out on Twitch. Whoever it is that you feel like, hey, this is somebody that's really good in the mental health field and I'd love them to have some support as well. I don't even ask for you to say, "Hey, do this for me." I'm just saying if you have anybody, obviously you can always share our stuff, and I would love to get our stuff out there too. But I want to make sure that whatever people are looking for, they're able to find it easily.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, this is not about me sitting in front of a camera and being told, "Oh my gosh, I'm so awesome and I'm doing such a great job for the world and I'm saving people." What my goal here is to build up a community. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
all about the community. Is if we're not your cup of tea, if you came on and you're like watching us for these last 5 minutes, you're like, I don't really like how they work. There might be another streamer or another content creator that is your thing. If you maybe like reading blogs, but you don't like the videos, if you prefer memes, I make memes, by the way. One of the things I do is make the memes of our mental health stuff because that way we have all of our bases covered. Eventually, I might have these all turned into podcasts. Working on it. It's a lot more confusing and problematic than I thought it was going to be. So I'm still working on that. That's another thing I'm going to be rolling out. My videos take a little bit more of a different take. My videos are corresponding to the blogs. So they're just kind of a auditory way of reading my blogs. Here we have more of a conversation. So whatever your cup of tea is, if you have other people that you're like, hey, these people are super my cup of tea, will you feature them? Will you support them? Will you put their content out? Absolutely, I
Mm-hmm.
will. I love it. I absolutely, my favorite thing, Follow Fridays on Twitter from now on is completely dedicated to share your stuff, share who you want me to support. It's not about me getting followers. I am about getting you followers. I'm about getting your stuff out. So
Yep.
if you have stuff, please put it up because that's what we do. And so yeah, so you do have to do a little work. That's what the whole stigma and support is that you do have to do some work. But if you put in that work, there's tons of us out here who are giving you the information of exactly what you need to do.
Yeah, there's support out there. You just gotta take the first couple of steps. It takes everybody, and I think we're starting to kind of wrap things up for today. What I guess my last 2 cents about all of this is that nobody can do it alone. Nobody can assume that they can make the change on their own. This is a societal thing, and when it comes to making changes in society, it's a gradient change, which means it's not going to happen overnight. It might take generations. And in fact, we've seen this. We can see the differences of mental health change. I'll give you one quick example before. Okay, World War II. Your grandpa came home from the war, didn't talk about it. There was no such thing as a diagnosis of PTSD, so maybe they had to try and cope with that with alcohol. Maybe they were abusive. Maybe they had all these issues. But let's take a look at it today. It's very common knowledge now for someone who could go to war or who've been subjected to trauma, like a really bad accident or huge natural disaster, that they might have PTSD. It's a thing now. So there is change. So we need to keep pushing that change forward so that people can feel like they can come forward with their issues and get the help that they need.
My dad doesn't watch my streams, and I don't even think he knows I have a stream,
Mm-hmm.
so this won't get back to him. But after he was in a motorcycle accident, he started seeing a therapist, and this was a few years ago. And he recently has been telling me, he's like, "Oh yeah, therapists are great. I never, they actually like help you and they talk to you." And he came from the era where you don't go to therapy.
Mm-hmm.
He comes from construction and these things that men don't go to therapy is kind of how he's always been in his whole life. And so he came to me and was like, "Oh yeah, therapist." He goes, "So I mean, is this kind of what you want to do?" And I'm like, "That's what I do."
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "No, no, no, but you want to do this in the future?" I'm like, "No, I'm actually, I literally have the same degree that this person has, like literally, like my
Yeah.
degree is probably the exact same as this person has. In fact, I'm going for the doctorate. Does yours have a doctorate? Then I technically might have more education than
Mm-hmm.
you're a therapist." And so this is even something that I'm seeing in my own family, where my dad is like suddenly on the mental health. I mean, his daughter being in it, he still doesn't read my content, but he at least is on board with
Mm-hmm.
mental health education in general, which is a huge step if you knew my dad. So yeah, we're seeing some huge changes in what we're doing and talking about it. And we just went through mental health awareness and PTSD awareness months. So the last 2 months
Mm-hmm.
have been very focused on mental health in general, and there was a lot of conversation about it. So I think we're starting to get there, and now I think we're starting to get into the phase of, well, now that we know it's an issue and now that we're accepting that's an issue, what do I do about it
Mm-hmm.
now?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where that education comes in. And again, I'm not pushing my own content. Yes, I have content out there. I would love for you to read my content because I want it to do it for a reason. I didn't do it just to, sit in a drawer. I did it, so people would read it. But it's not my content that I'm really concerned about. It's just getting the education in general.
Yep.
So if there's anything that my 2 cents of what I want to be brought and taken away from this is just making sure that you need to put in the work. As
Hmm.
frustrating that is, you want to, we're handing you this information on a golden platter right now, saying if you look at all of our other videos, hey, if you want to know about PTSD, we have literally like 4 hours of content about PTSD, all split into chapters, by the way, so you
Whew.
don't even have to watch all
Perfect.
4 hours. You can watch whatever you want to watch within
Hmm.
it. Um, so we're giving this to you in on a silver platter right now and saying, hey, anything you want we'll cover, and if it's not something we cover, somebody else covers. And the only caveat to this is that you actually have to go out and get it. You actually have to go out and read it.
Yep.
You have to actually go out and learn it.
Click that link.
Yeah, click the link,
Yep.
and you're also going to be helping out a person who is a content creator. You're helping out people like us. And we're creators, so we know it's hard, it's not easy. We have to come up with these ideas, we have to be on social media, we have to do a lot of stuff. And so, support a content creator. If you're not supporting us, support another one. We really truly do not care. Just get the information that you need.
All right, well, let's go ahead and start wrapping things up. Again, folks, I really appreciate the conversations that were going in chat. We saw all of them. Some of them we just didn't want to say and vocalize just because of the nature of what you're saying. I don't want you to think that we weren't seeing you, folks. I
We saw all of
appreciate,
it.
yeah, we saw all of it, and I appreciate, and I really makes me realize that some of you folks are really comfortable enough to be able to talk about this during the stream, and that's important to me. It means that we're doing something right.
Yeah.
And again, keep your eye on the social media. Keep your eye on as far as the topics that we have. We value your input as far as other topics and where to go. We do plenty of game codes that we give away to help spread awareness, because Hannah does a great job of kind of like, all right, you answer these questions and now you might win a video game. So I mean, come on, it's a win-win. And
Yeah.
so again, I from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate everybody here today. Um, Hannah, what do you got for
Yeah,
closing?
just if you want to support us, I know we've mentioned it a few times, but if you want to support us, please check out our social media. It is the best way to give us the support, just because the more people that are liking and sending and sharing and retweeting and tagging, the more our content gets out and the more growth we can see. And again, our goal is not to sit here and say, hey, give us money, but if you do want to support getting us some advertising money so that we can start reaching populations that maybe we don't have access to right now, we do have a Patreon. You can find that in the link. You can find it on all of our social media, everywhere we have it. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, our YouTube. We could really use some YouTube love right now. I'd love to see our subscriptions get a little higher. And one of the reasons for that is because, again, I'd like to start having some featured videos. Matt and I were actually just interviewed um, for a segment recently, and I'm hoping to get that up soon once I get the link to it. So that's something to look forward to in the future. I have my own personal content as far as videos and blogs, very different than what we do here on Psi streams. So something to look forward to. And I know that Matt has a lot of stuff that he's doing with Stack Up. So any way you want to support us is absolutely
Oh yeah.
fantastic. But likes are great. Shares and subscriptions, that's what's going to help us grow. So if you want to support us, that's the best way to do it. And we're not going to be streaming for the rest of July. The next week is Comic Con here in San Diego. This weekend I know is a little tough. By the way, happy Pride to anybody in San Diego. Yesterday was our Pride parade, so happy Pride to everybody out there. My shirt didn't come in on time, or else I would have been wearing it today. Unfortunately, hopefully I'll have it for next stream. So you won't see us again until August, but we will be very, very active. We're going to be posting stuff. I plan to put another video out at the end of the week for my own content, and I hope to have another blog up maybe by the end of the month. I have 3 different guest blogging spots I've been asked to do, so I'm trying to get those up by the end of the month as well. So if you're also interested in mental health, I am starting to do a new thing called the Mighty. If you're not familiar with the Mighty, it's a lot of mental health and physical health blogs and content, and I am a contributor on that. So if you are a person who already uses the Mighty, you can find me on that. Again, Hannah Siller. And so you can find us Psi Streams, Serene Life Counseling, and Hannah Siller, and that's where you can find all my stuff.
All right, folks, we're going to sign off for the day. Enjoy your Sunday. Take care of one another, please, and we will see you in August. Take care, everybody, and see you
and
later.
If you're at Comic-Con on Friday, I'll be there. So if you're at Comic-Con on Friday, you can, and you see me, just say hi.
Stack Up will be there too. We'll see you guys.
Cool. I'll go see them then.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
Bye.